Pal, everyone is talking about this NAFTA. Are we in? Are we out? Did the invitation get lost in the mail somehow? To help us sort through all of this, Stephen Pym is joining us, investment advisor, TD Wealth, private investment advice, trying to sort of make sense out of what all of this means for you and your bottom line. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about this, right? So Bloomberg, National Post, these are all the reports are coming out that basically negotiations were taking place between the U.S. and Mexico, and Christopher Freeland was left out of it. The invitation got lost. What exactly was this on purpose? What's going on exactly?
Yeah, so National Post first reported it, and then Bloomberg picked it up. And it's certainly a very bad indication for the Canadian negotiations. Basically, the articles are saying that Canada was completely left out of the negotiations, and that the U.S. and Mexico are going to make a bilateral agreement first.
Which puts us where?
Puts us in a bad situation, certainly since NAFTA is a trilateral agreement. Certainly for certain industries, it could put us at a huge disadvantage in negotiating certain agreements.
Let's talk about these certain industries. What are we talking about? Everyone hears tariffs, everyone hears aluminum, everyone hears steel. Who's going to get hit first if this actually goes through bilaterally?
Well, the one that we certainly keep our eye on is manufacturing. Secondly, a big one is auto parts, and agriculture. We know that the Trump administration is banging their drums about milk, for example.
Yes, our dairy cartels, apparently. This was a thing. We didn't know this was happening, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the States certainly has a lot of milk. You know, an interesting statistic is that milk consumption in the States has gone down almost 30% in the last 10 years, while production is way up, so they definitely want to get rid of their milk. But certainly when we look at, you know, particular stocks or particular companies, the ones that seem to be pretty challenged right now, because there's this uncertainty and continued uncertainty, are definitely auto parts, autos, and manufacturing.
And what does this do for the TSX? What are we talking about when we talk about markets, not just, you know, in Canada? Let's talk about global markets. What does this mean? Well,
it creates a lot of uncertainty, certainly with, you know, the continued headlines about tariffs against China. These kind of headlines for Canada. You certainly see a lot of growth around the world, but markets have been relatively, their wheels are stuck in a ditch. We've had a lot of growth in Canada over the last 2 quarters, and yet you see the TSX not really making any gains this year at all.
Okay, this is just because of the uncertainty, or?
Certainly, there's been some areas of growth like oil and gas, but that's such a much more macro situation because the price of oil is so dependent on other universal factors. But there's been a lot of growth in that sector for Canada. It's probably been the biggest. But other sectors have been falling behind when reasonably, if there was more certainty with our free trade agreement, those companies would probably be showing a little bit more profitability.
So I have to ask you, so what's the end game here? What's Trump's end game? Obviously, it's to, you know, make America great again, America first. And is it just basically, I don't care what happens to my neighbors? Or is it just like, okay, no, I'm starting with Mexico, put Canada at a disadvantage, and then come back and make nice? How do you see this happening? Or can you even make sense of this?
It is an administration that carries a lot of uncertainty as it is. I mean, Trump can fly off the handle at any small thing, and certainly while they're going into midterm elections, you know, reacting to any challenge to dairy farmers or farmers would be a big rallying cry for him. And certainly we've seen him react, you know, to things, you know, for example, when Trudeau said that Canadians won't be bullied, you know, a bully's reaction was to turn around and
bully some more.
And bully some more, punch him in the nose. But the unfortunate thing is that even while Trudeau's approval ratings went very high during that period, we've been seeing that the Americans are not willing to sit at the table with us since that event.
Since that one event.
It would seem. Yeah.
So in terms of the people at home, people are watching, they're listening, they want to invest, they want to put their money. I mean, where do people do? What's a safe investment right now? What should we be staying away from?
Well, it's always a good idea to have diversification. And of course, investors right now will be looking at their portfolios, especially if they're in Canadian stocks. This year to date, we've seen that the TSX is unchanged. Even like completely even since January 1st. But always, rule of thumb would be to have diversification in your portfolio. Don't panic. But certainly, because there's this uncertainty, if there was sort of a rotation to some sort of safety, safer stocks like value stocks, more blue chip kind of stocks. But then again, it's difficult to make recommendations without seeing a person's, personal
Yeah, it's case
portfolio.
by case. Go see someone like Stephen Pym and let him sort of sort it out for you before you panic.
Feel free to email me. I'll get to you. But certainly it's a one-off basis because depending on where you are in your life, what your goals are financially, and certainly what your risk profile is.
Yeah.
But honestly, we get a lot of phone calls, with people saying, what's going on? Should I be worried? So there is a bit of panic right now.
Stephen Pym, the advice is don't panic, though. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, investment advisor again with TD Wealth Private Investment Advice. Thanks for sort of, letting us get a glimpse of what's going on. Stay tuned. You're watching BT on City.